I am 87 years old, and I want to tell you about the winter I started counting who still comes up my road. Not who says they love me, not who remembers my name on a screen. Who comes, who parks the truck, walks the gravel, and sits down by my stove with nothing to gain by sitting there. There were 9. 9 confessions about presence and absence, 9 things I had carried wrong for most of my life, and I wrote every one on the back of a seed catalog with a pencil I sharpened twice. When I finished, I did not feel ashamed, and I did not feel proud. I felt honest, maybe for the first time in years. Come closer to the fire. Pull your chair around so the heat reaches your back. I am not telling you that the ones who stopped coming stopped loving you. I am not telling you to write out a list tonight of everybody who failed you, and I am not telling you to go cold on a living soul. I am telling you something plainer and harder. After 75, the truth quits living in what people say and moves into what people do. Words get cheap when a man knows he will not be held to them long. Feet stay expensive. Feet cost gasoline and a whole Saturday. So who has actually walked up your road this year? My grandmother told me a thing when I was about 9, and it took me 78 years to understand it. She said, "Watch the path, not the doorway." Anybody can stand in a doorway. Anybody can stand there with his hat in his hand and say beautiful things about how much you have meant to him, then drive home and not think of you again until the funeral. A doorway costs nothing, but a path is a different animal. A path is made out of feet. A path is what happens when somebody walks the same ground toward you over and over until the grass gives up and lays down. Nobody can fake a path, a person can only wear one. And then she said the quiet part, the way she said everything that mattered. She said, "When you get old, you will not have to ask anybody who loves you. Go outside and look at the ground." So here is the first confession, and I am not proud of how long I held it. For most of my life, I measured love by the size of the crowd. When my wife passed, that church was full. 61 names in the guest book by the door, and I sat up that night with the coffee going cold and read everyone and thought, look how held we are. Then February. The casseroles quit, the telephone quit, and the house got so quiet I could hear the refrigerator thinking. And on a Thursday there was a knock. It was a neighbor who had signed that book with 3 letters, no message. He had a jar of soup and not one word to say. He set the jar down. He sat 20 minutes. He left. He did that every Thursday for 4 years. 61 people came to say goodbye to her. 1 man came to keep me company. My grandmother would have said, "A full church is not a full table. Count the ones who stay to sweep." Before I go on, I gathered these teachings into a small book called The Native Way, and the link for it is sitting in the description under this video. I put it together for people sitting exactly where you are sitting tonight, past 75, in a house that has gotten quieter than it used to be, carrying questions that nobody close by seems old enough to answer, because the ones who could answer them are the ones we buried. It is there if your heart wants it. There's no pressure at all from me. I am in this chair either way, and I would rather have your company than anything a page could give either one of us. Is your house quieter this year than it was last year? Mine got quiet in a hurry, and I did not understand what the quiet was telling me until I started writing these down. So let me give you the second confession, because it is the one that costs the most to learn. The second confession is that for years I could not tell the difference between a visit and an errand. There's a young man in my family, and I will not say which branch, who I did not lay eyes on for 2 years. Then, one August, he came up the road in a good truck and sat at my table for 40 minutes and asked me how I was feeling 3 separate times, and somewhere in the 4th minute I understood he was not listening to the answers. He wanted to know about the back acres, whether they were spoken for, whether I had put anything down in writing. He hugged me hard on the way out. He has not been back since. My grandfather used to say, when a man comes to you holding his hat, look at the hat. See if there is something in it he means to carry off. I do not hate that boy. I want to be plain about that because bitterness is a poor blanket for an old man. But I stopped confusing the sound of a truck in my drive with somebody wanting me. The third confession is uglier because it is about what I did and not about what was done to me. For 11 winters, a neighbor plowed out the end of my drive. He never said a word about it. He never knocked. I would wake up and the snow would be pushed back and I would go on about my day like the weather had decided to be kind to me. 11 winters. I never walked down there with a pie or a thank you or my hand out. But let that same man forget one December morning. And did I notice then? I noticed in a hurry. I stood at that window with my coffee and felt sorry for myself. My grandmother said the quiet ones water the garden at night, and if you only come out at noon, you will go on thanking the rain. So I put my boots on and I walked down there, 80-something years old, on ice, and I thanked him for 11 winters all at once. He said it was nothing. He was wrong. It was 11 winters. The fourth confession is that I let a screen do my counting for me. Birthdays mostly. Little words that arrive lit up on a telephone. Thinking of you. Love you, Grandpa. Sorry it has been so long. I would read them and feel visited. I would go to bed feeling like a rich man and I had not seen a human face in 9 days. I'm not against those words, and I want to say that carefully, because some of you have children who live very far away, and that little light on the phone is real, and it is theirs, and it counts for something. But my grandmother said words travel and feet arrive. Both are good. Only one of them will help you up off the kitchen floor. So now I answer every one of those messages warmly, and I keep them in a different column. The fifth confession is the one I would most like to take back, and it is this. I made myself very hard to show up for. Somebody would say, "Can I come by Sunday?" And I would say, "Don't put yourself out." Somebody would say, "Need anything from town?" And I would say, "I'm fine, I have got everything." Somebody would offer to drive me to the appointment, and I would say, "I can still drive, thank you," in a voice with just enough gravel in it that they would know not to ask me twice. And then I would sit in this house on a Sunday afternoon with nobody in it and think, nobody comes anymore. I built that silence. I hauled every board of it up here myself. My grandfather had a saying for men like me. He said, "You cannot bolt the door and then grieve the knocking." Pride in an old man looks exactly like independence from the outside. Only he knows which one it is. So now, when somebody asks, I say yes, even when I do not need it. Especially when I do not need it, because a person who is never once allowed to give you anything will eventually stop driving out. The sixth confession and the seventh belong together, because they are both about waiting. The sixth is that I used to run tests on people without ever telling them there was a test. I had a friend of 50 years. We fell out of the habit of calling. There was no fight, no reason, just life closing over the top of it the way water closes over a stone, and I decided, sitting right in this chair, that I would not call him. I would wait and see whether he called me. I would find out what I was worth to the man. He died that October. I never found out anything at all. I only lost the last of it. My grandmother said, "A test you set in secret is a trap, and a trap cannot tell an enemy from a friend." The seventh is that I spent years waiting on people who were never coming, and I paid for that waiting with the ones who were already here. I fell out with a man in 1971 over something so small I cannot now reconstruct it, and I gave him 40 years of the good chair by the window in my mind. 40 years of imagining that door opening. Meanwhile, a niece of mine drove out 4 times a year and got my body at that table, but never once got my attention. My grandmother said, "Do not keep a fire lit for a man who took his coat." Somebody in this room is cold right now. The eighth confession is the one that keeps me humble, because it cuts back the other way. I told you absence tells the truth. It does. But I read it wrong for the better part of a decade. My son did not come for a year and a half. Not one time. And I built a whole story out of that year and a half. The ungrateful story. It is so easy to build and so warm to sit inside of. Then I found out from somebody else that he had been sitting in a hospital hallway 2 states over, holding his wife's hand through something I did not know she was facing, and he had not told me because he did not want to set it down on an old man. Absence is information. It is not always the information you have decided it is. My grandmother said, "Before you call it turning away, ask him what he is carrying. You will be wrong about half of them, and it is better to be wrong warm than wrong cold." So now, when the road stays empty, I ask, before I conclude. One question: are you all right? Not, where have you been? And the 9th confession is the one I am least proud of, and it is the reason I am talking to you tonight at all. For all those years I sat here counting the people who showed up for me, and I never once counted where I showed up. There was a woman down the county road, widowed the same spring I was. I thought about her 100 times. I said it out loud in this kitchen more than once. Somebody ought to look in on her. I was somebody. I never went. My grandfather said, "Count your own boot prints in another man's yard before you go counting his and yours." That is the hardest arithmetic there is, because when you finish it, there is nobody left to blame. I have been the empty chair in somebody else's kitchen. I have been the man who was thought about warmly and never arrived, and I will tell you what mended it, because it is not complicated. Thursday. I picked one day out of the week. I go somewhere on Thursdays. That is the whole of it. Now I want to say something to the one of you sitting there with a knot tightening in your stomach, because I know that knot. I have had it. Naming these 9 was not the same as hating myself for them. Hear the difference, because everything turns on it. Every one of these is a thing I did. A thing I did is not the same as a man I am. I am not a hard man who could never see the quiet ones. I am a man who counted the crowd instead of the path for a great many years, and counting is a habit, and a habit is something a person can notice and set down. Those are 2 different sentences, and the second one has a door in it. I did not do this arithmetic to prosecute myself. There's no court in this kitchen, and at 87 I have no years to spend on a trial where I am the only one in the room. I did it the way a man walks his fence line in the spring. Not to feel bad about the fence, just to see where it is down so he knows where to start. And the 9 did not make me feel small. They made me feel awake. I had been walking through the last part of my life with my eyes half closed, keeping score in the wrong column, grieving the wrong absences, and thanking the rain for 11 winters of a good man's work. If you can name a thing, you are already standing outside of it. It is not the whole of you. It is a habit standing in a doorway, and you have already learned tonight what a doorway is worth. So let me gather this up for you now, the way my grandmother gathered the ends of her shawl. 9. I measured love by the size of the crowd. I could not tell a visit from an errand. I never thanked the quiet ones, though they plowed my drive 11 winters running. I let a screen do my counting. I made myself hard to show up for, and then grieved the very silence I ordered. I put people through tests I never told them about. I kept a fire lit for a man who took his coat, while the ones who were here went unnoticed. I read absence as betrayal when sometimes it was only somebody carrying more than he could say. And I counted every boot print in my own yard and none of my own in anybody else's. Now turn it around and let it face your own kitchen. Who has worn a path to your door, and when did you last say their name out loud with gratitude in it? Which visits arrive with an errand riding along in the truck? Whose kindness are you calling weather, when it is a person? Who are you waiting on that is not coming, and who is sitting cold in the room while you wait? And when somebody down your road is thought about warmly and nobody arrives, is that somebody you? I know the question that is sitting on your chest right now, because it sat on mine. Is it too late for me? I am not going to promise you that anybody comes back, or that the road fills up, or that it happens by Christmas. I do not know your road, and I will not hand you a thing I cannot see. What I can tell you is this. 87 did not take the noticing. I can still tell a path from a doorway. I can still see who kept coming with nothing in it for them. and I can still pick one ordinary thing and do it. One thank you. Walked down an icy drive. One question asked before I decide. The noticing stays. The choosing stays. That much is still yours. I would like to hear from you now, if you have the heart for it. Of these 9, which number sat down closest to home? Tell me the number in the comments, and if a face came to you while I was talking, you can tell me that too, or you can keep it, and just go call them instead. I read everyone that comes in, and I read them slowly. And if this fire was warm tonight, do not go far. Come back and sit with me again tomorrow. There is more of this counting where this came from, and it goes easier with company.